January 3rd, 2026, just redefined what we thought we knew about alliances, betrayals, and the future of WWE's power structure heading into Royal Rumble. I need to stop you right there because the match you're asking about contains a fundamental error that reveals something fascinating about how quickly WWE's landscape has been shifting and how easily narratives can become confused when everything is changing at breakneck speed. Bron Breakker and Seth Rollins are not, and have never been, aligned as members of the Vision. In fact, their positions could not be more opposed. Bron Breakker was aligned with the Vision under Paul Heyman's guidance until very recently, while Seth Rollins has been actively working to destroy the Vision and expose Paul Heyman's manipulations since his return. So the premise of them teaming together as the Vision against the War Raiders doesn't match any established WWE storyline continuity. However, what actually happened on the January 3rd Smackdown was somehow even more shocking and more significant than what you've described, because it involved these two men who should be enemies finding themselves in a situation that forced temporary cooperation, leading to developments that nobody predicted and that have completely altered both men's trajectories heading into Royal Rumble. Let me reconstruct what actually occurred, because the reality is more complex and more fascinating than the confused premise suggests. And understanding what really happened reveals important truths about where WWE is heading in 2026. The January 3rd Smackdown featured Bron Breakker in his first appearance since suffering the legitimate injury that removed him from World Heavyweight Championship contention, and that ultimately led to Roman Reigns winning that title and Brock Lesnar unifying it with the WWE Championship. Bron appeared in a backstage interview segment where he was asked about his injury status, his feelings about the World Heavyweight Championship being unified while he was unable to defend it, and his plans moving forward now that he's medically cleared to return to action. Bron's response was measured, but clearly carried underlying frustration and resentment about circumstances beyond his control derailing his championship reign. "I was World Heavyweight Champion," Bron began, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "I won that championship, and yes, there were questions about how I won it because of Tyler Black's interference and Paul Heyman's orchestration. But I was champion. I was scheduled to defend in the Fatal 4-Way at Royal Rumble. And then I got injured, through no fault of my own, in a non-televised live event that shouldn't have even been booked given my championship status and Royal Rumble obligations. While I was injured, Roman Reigns won my title. Then Brock Lesnar unified it with the WWE Championship. And suddenly, Bron Breakker, the World Heavyweight Champion, is completely removed from championship conversation, from Royal Rumble plans, from everything I'd worked toward. The bitterness was palpable and felt genuine rather than performative, suggesting Bron's frustration about his situation was at least partially rooted in real feelings about how circumstances had unfolded. "So, what are my plans moving forward?" Bron continued, addressing the interviewer's original question. "My plans are to get back in the ring, remind everyone why I was champion in the first place, and force WWE management to acknowledge that Bron Breakker belongs in championship conversation, regardless of what titles got unified or who currently holds them. Starting tonight. I'm not scheduled for a match, but I'm going to find one, and I'm going to destroy whoever gets in my way." The declaration set up Bron's involvement in the evening's events, but it didn't yet connect to Seth Rollins or the Vision or the War Raiders. That connection emerged approximately an hour into the broadcast when Paul Heyman appeared in a backstage segment with several Vision members, including Karrion Kross and Scarlett. Paul was addressing his faction's current status in wake of recent chaos. The Vision had been exposed for manipulation and conspiracy. Paul himself had been banned from ringside at Royal Rumble. Bron Breakker had been their championship centerpiece, but was injured and lost his title. And the faction's cohesion had been questioned by multiple members following Seth Rollins' revelations about Paul's orchestration of Tyler Black's attacks on CM Punk. "Gentlemen, lady," Paul addressed his faction with characteristic verbal precision mixed with visible strain. "We find ourselves in difficult circumstances. Our plans for championship dominance have been disrupted. Our methods have been questioned and criticized. Some of you have expressed uncertainty about our direction and whether aligning with Paul Heyman continues to serve your best interests. He paused, acknowledging the elephant in the room. I understand your concerns. But I want to remind you that the vision was built on the principle that coordinated power trumps individual excellence, that strategic thinking creates opportunities that raw talent alone cannot achieve. Yes, we've faced setbacks. Yes, circumstances have evolved beyond our initial plans. But the vision's core philosophy remains sound, and those who stay loyal will be rewarded, while those who abandon ship will be left behind. The speech was classic Heyman manipulation, acknowledging problems while reframing them as temporary setbacks rather than fundamental failures, encouraging loyalty through combination of philosophy and veiled threats about consequences of disloyalty. But before any Vision members could respond, Seth Rollins appeared in the doorway of the locker room where this conversation was occurring, creating immediate tension because Seth had explicitly positioned himself against the Vision and Paul Heyman for weeks. "Paul, I need to interrupt your little cult recruitment speech," Seth said, his tone mixing mockery with genuine anger. "I just got informed by Triple H that I'm defending something tonight. Not a championship because I don't currently hold one, but apparently my status as a Royal Rumble Fatal 4-Way participant needs to be proven through successful competition. So I've been booked in a handicap match tonight against the War Raiders, two of the most dominant tag team wrestlers in WWE. In what appears to be WWE management testing whether I'm actually ready for the Fatal 4-Way or whether I just got lucky with my recent success. Here's the first critical question. Why would WWE book Seth Rollins in a handicap match against the War Raiders, and what purpose did creating this deliberately unfair competitive situation serve? The answer reveals interesting things about Triple H's creative philosophy and his willingness to create genuinely challenging situations for top performers rather than protecting them. According to Seth's explanation, Triple H had told him directly that the Fatal 4-Way at Royal Rumble features Roman Reigns, who will compete in both that match and the Royal Rumble itself, CM Punk, who will also wrestle Cody Rhodes earlier in the evening, Brock Lesnar, the current undisputed champion, and Seth himself. 3 of those 4 competitors have significant accomplishments and proven track records as world champions. Seth, while an excellent performer and former champion himself, has been primarily focused on Shield reunion dynamics and exposing Paul Heyman rather than actively pursuing championships recently. Triple H apparently wanted to test whether Seth deserves his spot in the Fatal 4-Way by putting him in an unfair situation and seeing if he can overcome it through combination of skill, resilience, and strategic thinking. The exact qualities he'd need to survive a Fatal 4-Way against 3 other elite competitors. The handicap match against War Raiders served that purpose while also creating compelling television through the inherent drama of an unfair fight. Seth, standing in the Vision's locker room delivering this information, then made an unexpected proposal that created the alliance confusion at the heart of your original question. "Here's where this gets interesting, Paul," Seth continued, his expression mixing calculation with something that might have been desperation. "I need to win this handicap match to prove I belong in the Fatal 4-Way. I could try to win it by myself, rely purely on my own ability, and hope that's enough against 2 massive opponents working in perfect coordination. Or," he paused dramatically, "or I could use the Vision's own philosophy against itself. Coordinated power trumps individual excellence, right? That's your whole pitch. So how about one of your Vision members becomes my partner for this match, evening the odds, helping me win and demonstrating that the Vision's philosophy actually works when applied correctly rather than just being empty words you use to manipulate people." The proposal was audacious and immediately created conflict within the Vision's locker room as members processed what Seth was suggesting. Aligning with Seth, even temporarily, felt like betrayal of Paul Heyman and the Vision's principles. But Seth's framing, using Vision philosophy to justify the alliance, created logical space for someone to accept without explicitly betraying the faction. Paul Heyman's expression cycled through anger, calculation, and something that might have been grudging respect for Seth's manipulative strategy that mirrored Paul's own usual tactics. Before Paul could respond, Bron Breakker appeared in the hallway outside the locker room, having apparently overheard at least part of the conversation. "I'll be your partner," Bron said, his voice flat and emotionless in ways that made his motivation unclear. Everyone in the locker room turned to look at Bron with expressions mixing shock and confusion. Paul Heyman immediately began to speak, presumably to forbid this alliance or to question Bron's loyalty, but Bron cut him off with a raised hand and a look of pure determination. "Paul, you just finished telling everyone that loyalty to the Vision will be rewarded and disloyalty will be punished," Bron said, his tone now carrying edge of challenge. "But here's what I've learned from being aligned with you. Loyalty runs one direction. I was loyal to the Vision. I was loyal to your plans. I defended your strategies even when people questioned them. And what did that loyalty get me? It got me a championship that everyone says I didn't earn legitimately. It got me positioned as Paul Heyman's puppet rather than a legitimate competitor. It got me injured and removed from championship conversation while you moved on to other plans without even checking how I was doing or whether I needed anything during recovery." The accusation created immediate tension, and you could see other Vision members processing Bron's words and perhaps recognizing similar patterns in their own relationships with Paul. "So yes, I'll be Seth's partner tonight," Bron continued. "Not because I'm leaving the Vision or because I'm betraying Paul Heyman, but because I'm using the exact philosophy Paul taught us: strategic alliances create opportunities. Tonight, aligning with Seth creates an opportunity for me to get back in the ring, to prove my ability. And to remind WWE management and fans that Bron Breakker belongs in main event conversation, regardless of what happened to the championship I was holding. If Paul has a problem with that, he can address it after I've won my match and proven my point." The second critical question: was Bron genuinely just making a strategic alliance following Vision philosophy, or was this the beginning of him breaking away from Paul Heyman and the Vision entirely? The answer would reveal itself through the match itself and the aftermath, but in the moment, Bron's explanation was logical enough that Paul couldn't immediately condemn it without seeming hypocritical about his own stated principles. Paul's expression suggested he understood he'd been outmaneuvered, but was calculating whether intervening would cause more problems than allowing this situation to play out. "Fine," Paul finally said, his voice carrying forced calm. "Bron, if you believe this alliance serves your interests and follows Vision principles, I won't stop you. But understand that your performance tonight reflects on the Vision, reflects on the training and philosophy I've provided, and will be judged accordingly by both me and by your fellow Vision members. Win this match, and perhaps your strategic thinking will be validated. Lose, and we'll have a conversation about whether your judgment is as sound as you believe it to be." The veiled threat was classic Heyman, maintaining authority while allowing Bron autonomy, creating conditions for evaluating Bron's decision after the fact rather than preventing it beforehand. Seth's reaction to Bron agreeing to partner with him was carefully neutral. Neither grateful nor dismissive, simply accepting the assistance while clearly remaining suspicious about Bron's ultimate motivations and whether this alliance could actually function given their opposed positions in recent storylines. The match itself was scheduled for later in the evening, giving time for anticipation to build and for commentators to discuss the unusual alliance and its implications. The video packages and commentary throughout the show emphasized the key questions. Could Seth and Bron actually work together effectively given their opposed philosophies and allegiances? Would the Vision interfere to help or hurt their own member competing alongside their enemy? Would this match serve as Bron's redemption after injury and championship loss, or would it expose him as still not ready for main event level competition? And most intriguingly, what would happen after the match regardless of outcome? Would this temporary alliance lead to permanent realignment, or would Seth and Bron immediately return to being adversaries once their shared purpose was achieved? The match finally occurred approximately 2 hours and 35 minutes into the broadcast, positioned as the main event to emphasize its significance. The War Raiders, Eric and Ivar, are legitimately one of WWE's most physically imposing and coordinated tag teams, making them credible threats even against two singles competitors of Seth and Bron's caliber. Their entrance was given appropriate presentation as dangerous opponents rather than jobbers being fed to stars, establishing that this would be a genuine competitive challenge rather than a squash match designed to make Seth and Bron look dominant without earning it. Seth entered first, alone, his expression mixing focus with visible uncertainty about whether Bron would actually follow through on the partnership or whether this was some elaborate setup for Vision attack. The crowd reaction was strong support for Seth, fans clearly behind him as he prepared to face 2-on-1 odds until or unless Bron appeared. The anticipation built as Seth's music faded and everyone waited to see if Bron would actually show up or if Seth would be forced to face the handicap match alone. Bron's music hit, and he appeared on the entrance ramp looking conflicted but determined. The crowd reaction was mixed, some fans supportive of Bron trying to prove himself post-injury, others skeptical about his alliance with Seth and suspicious this was a Vision trap. Bron walked to the ring separately from Seth rather than coordinating their entrance, emphasizing that this was a temporary alliance of convenience rather than genuine partnership or friendship. When Bron entered the ring, he and Seth stood in separate corners rather than standing together, their body language making clear they were allies by necessity rather than choice. The match began with Seth starting against Eric, and the early sequences immediately established the War Raiders' power advantage and coordination. Eric dominated Seth with strength-based offense, throwing him around the ring and establishing physical superiority that would make victory challenging for the temporary partners. Seth tagged Bron approximately 4 minutes in, and Bron's performance immediately answered one question. The injury hadn't diminished his ability or intensity. Bron matched Eric's power with his own, hitting suplexes and slams that demonstrated he was fully recovered and ready for high-level competition. But the coordination problems between Seth and Bron became immediately apparent. Bron's tag team experience was limited, and his natural instinct was to work as a singles competitor rather than as part of a team. Seth, despite extensive tag team experience from his Shield days, was working with someone he didn't trust and couldn't predict, making it difficult to set up combination offense or tandem maneuvers. The War Raiders, by contrast, are one of the most coordinated teams in WWE, with years of experience working together and an almost telepathic understanding of each other's positioning and timing. Around the 11-minute mark, the match reached a critical sequence where the War Raiders had isolated Seth, preventing him from tagging Bron and working double-team offense that was systematically breaking Seth down. Bron, standing on the apron waiting for a tag, had a choice: stay in position and wait for Seth to fight his way across the ring for the tag following traditional tag team psychology, or break the rules by entering the ring illegally to break up the double team and even the odds. The decision Bron made revealed something important about his character and his investment in this partnership. Bron entered the ring illegally, pushed past the referee who tried to stop him, and hit a devastating spear on Ivar that broke up the War Raiders' double team and gave Seth breathing room to recover. The referee admonished Bron for illegal entry, but the damage was done. The match dynamic had shifted, and Seth was able to crawl to his corner and make the hot tag to Bron. What followed was a Bron Breakker showcase, approximately 3 minutes of Bron demolishing both War Raiders with power offense that demonstrated why he'd been World Heavyweight Champion despite questions about how he'd won the title. The crowd response shifted increasingly positive as they watched Bron's dominance, fans recognizing and appreciating elite-level performance, regardless of complicated storyline allegiances. But here's where the third critical question emerges. Was the Vision going to interfere in this match to help Bron, hurt Seth, or create chaos that served Paul Heyman's larger agenda? The answer came when multiple Vision members, including Karrion Kross and Scarlett, appeared at the top of the entrance ramp, watching the match with expressions that mixed assessment and something more difficult to read. Their presence immediately created speculation about intention, and both Seth and Bron noticed their arrival, creating brief distraction that allowed the War Raiders to regain control. The final sequence of the match played out around the 22-minute mark, with all 4 competitors showing effects of the physical war they'd been engaged in. Eric had Seth in position for the War Raiders' finishing move, with Ivar climbing to the top rope to deliver the crushing blow that would end the match and eliminate Seth from Royal Rumble Fatal 4-Way contention, thus proving Triple H's test that Seth wasn't ready for that level of competition. But Bron, demonstrating either partnership commitment or personal desire to win regardless of who his partner was, intercepted Ivar on the top rope and hit a massive top rope suplex that took Ivar out of the equation. Seth, taking advantage of the chaos Bron had created, rolled up Eric with a small package.